Hey, what's up everybody, Nexel here. Today we're playing Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, and we're going to be talking about the new Supernova Plus Kingdom Hearts III Sora medal that just dropped recently in Global. Now, a few things to do before we get talking about it. The first one being, I didn't talk about the Master Ericus deal, but I do highly recommend against pulling for it. Number one, because it is just an upright power version of San Francisco Sora and Xemnas B. And remember, I didn't really give those medals such a great review. Yes, it is a strong medal, but that's really all it does. It doesn't really give you a lot of extra utility, with the biggest piece of utility being that it decreases count, and it decreases count by only 5, which is actually a pretty manageable number. So unless you need something that really decreases count, like you really need it desperately, honestly this is a big pass for me, especially since number 2, we do have a Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku coming out soon that is just far better in terms of damage, in terms of usefulness. So I highly recommend against pulling for Supernova Plus Master Ericus. And then another thing is that we did get a new free medal. So the Dylan medal event, you get a free Dylan medal, which is an upright speed. It's not nearly as good as the Sora that just came out, but if you're new, it's a free medal. And since the traits are farmable, you can farm for ground, aerial, extra attack, and strength plus 1,000 twice if you need to. Or if you're a long-term player and you just want a free raid medal, this is good too, because then you can get damage in raids plus 200%, or damage in raids 160 plus extra attack. So a free medal is always a free medal, and I highly recommend always getting them and trying to give them the best traits based on your scenario. Now let's go ahead and start talking about the Kingdom Hearts III Sora deal, and first I'd like to say that it's super awesome that we are actually starting to delve into the Remind artwork. So remember that this was the concept artwork that came out with Sora when they released more information about Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind. So I am super psyched that we're starting to get into this artwork, because that means we're likely going to be seeing new Xion medals, maybe ones in casual clothes. We obviously have a new Kairi medal coming up, so I'm super excited for a lot of the Remind artwork that is coming out. But as always, what we're going to do our banner analysis. We'll talk about the medal a little bit, the draw odds, and finally my thoughts and recommendations on whether or not I think you should be pulling for this medal. So first things first, any new banner, any new deal, make sure you check for how long it is going to be active. So in this case, we have until August 16th to decide if you want to pull for this medal, and that is a long time to decide. So remember that about 10 days ago, about 12 days ago, something like that, Master Ericus dropped. And now, here we are towards the end of his banner, and we have information about a new Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku, which is significantly better. So as always, I recommend waiting till the last day, because you never know what's coming out. Especially with JP Anniversary rolling out in September, they might have some sort of crazy deal that is going to be far worth it than this. So I always recommend waiting till the last day to either build up your jewels, see if you want to pull for this, see what comes out. So wait till August 16th if you want to pull for this medal. So in terms of the banner itself, it's really standard stuff. So every single pull is going to get you 3 Kingdom Hearts 3 medals, which you're generally going to use for sub-slots. You are going to sell them for draw points, or you're going to keep them for some sort of niche special attack. Remember that 100% magic reflection is still a relevant thing to do. So if you pull an anti-aqua, you don't want to sell it. You likely want to keep it just in case you need that 100% magic reflection. You'll also be getting 1 trait medal for Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora with every pull, and you'll also get 6 5-star or higher medals. Similarly to the Kingdom Hearts 3 medals, you're likely going to use these for sub-slots, or you're going to sell them for draw points. You'll also be getting 10 VIP coins. Now, the month just started, so remember that VIP coins are good for any banner that comes out between now and then the end of the month. So you have until August 31st to decide where you want to put these VIP coins. You'll also be getting 3 speed gems with every single pull. And remember, you don't pull because of the gems. Gems will come in time through various quests, through various rankings, so you don't pull for the gems. It's just nice icing on the cake. And it is a 5 mercy pull, which is really good, because when I saw these medals come out and compare them to what we had recently, I was like, oh shoot, they might make these like 10 mercy pulls. But it's really cool that we're sticking with the 5 mercy pull. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the medal itself. So as always, I prepped a template for this kind of thing. So this is Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora. He is going to be an upright speed medal that is tier 10. He has a new high base strength of 49,303. It's not much higher than the previous set of medals where they were about 49,011. We're only about 300 points up, but it's kind of showing that the previous set of medals weren't really good to begin with, because again, what made them really good is that they did a lot of damage. Now that we have new medals that have a higher base strength, they're just not as good as they used to be. So keep that in mind. That's why I said don't really pull for them. You know, there's something a little bit better coming out, and this is something that's not just a little bit, but a lot better than that set of medals. He has a base defense of 21,608, which is just a small improvement from before, and this is where Sora actually gets kind of nuts. He's got a multiplier of base, meaning minimum, a multiplier of 21.92. Remember in my San Francisco Sora video and the Xemnas B video, I said, you know, we would have expected these to have a little bit higher of a multiplier. Here's that new medal. It's not a tier 11, but it does have a multiplier that is 21.92 at the very minimum. And then 25% of the time, because that's the condition for damage plus, it's going to be hitting a 27.4 multiplier. That is the second highest multiplier in the entirety of this game, only falling short to the Kingdom Hearts 3 Gambler that has, I believe, a multiplier of 25% of the time. So that's a crazy high multiplier. Pairing it with a crazy high base strength, Sora is a really, really high damage medal, probably the best damage medal in the game right now. So keep in mind, one of the things that makes a multiplier good is that when we think about copy medals, remember that copy medals copy a multiplier. And that's what I've been saying again for the past set of medals, that multiplier is important to pay attention to because odds are you have copy medals and you're going to be copying the same medal over and over and over again. In this case, when you copy Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, that copy medal is going to get a 21.92 base multiplier, and then 25% of the time you're going to be hitting a 27.4 multiplier, which is, in my opinion, it's absolutely insane. That could make a big difference when it comes to things like PvE Coliseum or just clearing content in general. So moving on with the rest of the medal, he has a gauge cost of 6, which is a really high gauge cost. You will likely need an attack boost max SP gauge skill in order to make his gauges more manageable. So one thing to remember about attack boost max SP gauge skills is that you have to have the initial cost of the medal before the skill will work. So for example, this medal costs 6 gauges to activate, meaning that if you go into this medal, you're going through your rotation, you get to Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, and you only have 2 gauges, you will not be able to activate them even if you have attack boost 12 max gauge 0 on it. You have to have the initial cost up front. The gauge reduction applies after the skill is activated. So you have to have at minimum 6 gauges going into this skill before you can even activate it. So it is a high gauge cost. It's going to be very hard to manage without an SP reduction skill. So that's just some advice when you have to put that SP reduction skill on this medal. He does 3 hits, which is not really relevant because he has count plus minus 0. So let's move on to his special attack. So we are going back to a 2-turn buffer format. So remember that unless you get buffed, all these buffs I'm about to go over, you keep them for 2 full turns. So the first thing is that he is self-buffing for upright speed, which is always good to have a staple medal that is self-buffing. That means that when you get to this medal, even if you're debuffed, even if you have no buffs already, the medal will take care of itself. It will give you perfect buffs for upright speed and general. And that is super good because that means the medal doesn't need something like a Kingdom Hearts 3 Nominee or a Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi to activate before it. So super good stuff, in my opinion. You'll also be getting speed medal strength plus 4,500. Now remember that this is a 2-turn buffer. So let's just do some math really quick. So you activate it once, you get plus 4,500. You activate it twice because of something like extra attack, you're at plus 9,000. Now with extra attack, and on the second turn, because again, it stacks from the previous turn for 2 full turns. With extra attack on the second turn, you are plus 18,000, which is higher than the current max, or at least the ones that came with Master Ericus and with Xemnas B, where the previous max was 16,000 off the special attack. Now we are plus 2,000 more at 18,000, but it takes an extra turn. So keep that in mind that for things like PvE Coliseum and such, you're still going to want to use some of the older medals like San Francisco Sora or Xemnas B because you get all of that damage up front. So just keep that in mind. This takes 2 turns to reach its full potential. You'll also be getting special attack bonus plus 220%, which isn't nearly as relevant because again, we rely on supernova attacks to give us plus 300%, if not plus 320%. He does have a damage plus condition of critical hit chance 25%, and that's very similar to Dark Riku, with the change that Dark Riku activates a critical hit 50% of the time, whereas Sora activates it only 25% of the time. So 25% of the time, when you activate Sora, you hit that ridiculous 27.4 multiplier, and that is honestly insane. Remember that you're not just going to be relying on this medal. You're going to be copying this medal before and after it, likely. So likely you'll get about 4 to 6 activations every single turn, meaning that you will be hitting that critical chance at least once per turn. And honestly, it's such a crazy multiplier to think about. He also has count plus minus 0, which is pretty respectable because on average, you don't want to be decreasing count. On average, there are certain scenarios where it is good, but a lot of the high-end enemies do have a counter attack that usually debuffs you, or it gives you a status ailment, something like that. So on average, count plus minus 0 is better than being able to decrease the count. Looking at the supernova attack, it is a 1-turn buff, so it's kind of weird where a lot of the older medals like Final Fantasy VII Remake Sephiroth were a 2-turn special attack buff and a 2-turn supernova buff. This is only a 1-turn supernova buff, so just keep that in mind that the special attack and the supernova attack have 2 different durations. But for the supernova attack, it is self-buffing for upright speed, and that is always a good thing. Remember that supernova attacks are effects on command when you need them. So remember, for things like Barrier Masters, when you knock them out, they'll debuff you. But you know what you can do? Just save that Supernova Sora and then activate it after you get debuffed, and boom, you are back up to speed. You've got all the buffs you need. So it's always good to have a Supernova attack that gives you self-buffing on command. Activating the Supernova will also give all speed medals plus 12,000 strength, which is good. It's up to par with the Master Ericus medal, with the San Francisco Sora medal, being able to give you plus 12,000 strength for the turn. And then it also gives special attack bonus plus 320%. Now, it is a pretty good supernova for the same reason that Final Fantasy VII Remake Sephiroth supernova is good, but at the same time, remember that that supernova doesn't do anything else. It still affects count, it doesn't heal any gauges, it doesn't do any sort of defense boost piercing, so it's a pretty vanilla supernova attack, but being able to self-buff is a big deal. So just keep that in mind that the effect, the special attack, is much better than the supernova attack. So in terms of draw odds, nothing really special here. It is still a low chance to get it. So if you can't Mercy the medal, if you can't bring up the 15,000 jewels necessary to pull for it, I don't recommend pulling for it. And remember that even after you pull the medal, you likely need to buy 2 to 3 trait packs at 1,000 jewels each to give it the best traits. So you're looking at about 17,000 to 18,000 jewels. If you can't guarantee that by the end of this banner, I highly recommend not pulling for this medal. So what are my thoughts and recommendations on this medal? It's a really good staple upright speed medal. For the damage that it puts out, it's absolutely insane. So it self-buffs with the special attack and the supernova attack, which is always really good utility to have because it means the medal takes care of itself. So let's just say you run into a mission and the condition is you can only activate medals that have a gauge cost of 6 or more. You won't be able to activate something like Nominee. Yes, you might be able to just do a Reaper copy into the Nominee, but the Sora takes care of itself. If you can only bring 1 medal for some sort of crazy mission where you can only activate 6 gauges or higher medals, and you can only bring 1 medal, the Sora will take care of himself. And that's really good because supernova attack plus the special attack, you are looking at a lot of additional speed strength. So really, this is like an upgraded version of the Final Fantasy VII Remake Sephiroth medal, except the multiplier is way better. So remember that Final Fantasy VII Sephiroth had a multiplier at the best when there's only 1 enemy left of like about 21. Now, here comes Sora with a base multiplier of almost 22. And then a multiplier that can be as high as 27 hitting against all enemies. That is absolutely ridiculous. So this is more like an upgraded version of Final Fantasy VII Remake Sephiroth. If you thought Sephiroth was good, you should be thinking that this medal is good too for that same reason. Now, one thing, remember, when we talk about staples, you always want to ask yourself, does this replace my current staple? So in my particular case, does this medal replace my Final Fantasy VII Remake Tifa? So what I did is I prepared some math just to kind of help you visualize it. So in terms of sheer number, absolutely. This Sora is much better than Tifa. So this is on stream, I talked about a little bit being able to calculate the damage. So this is how you calculate the damage. You take the base strength of the medal, then you add on how much damage you get from its special attack. So in Tifa's case, we are looking at plus 6,000 with extra attack, and then with Sora, we're looking at plus 9,000 with extra attack for turn 1, and then you add on the supernova attack, and that's how much damage it does. You times that by the multiplier, and that gives you the damage before tiers or Keyblade multipliers or anything like that. And as you can see, Sora does a lot more than Tifa by about 400,000 points more. Now, that isn't too much different than San Francisco Sora. The real thing about Sora is that when he gets to turn 2 and you hit that critical chance. So this is the adjusted number set. So as you can see now, that 9,000 is plus 18,000 because it's turn 2. and then that 21.92 is now 27.40, 25% of the time. So Sora at his strongest literally almost does twice as much damage as Tifa, and that is a very significant amount of damage. So while Sora isn't really great for utility because his effects don't do much, he doesn't give you any sort of healing gauges, anything like that, the amount of sheer damage that he pushes out is incredible. He doesn't have any PvP utility like Tifa does, so I'll still be using Tifa for things like PvP, but in terms of things like PvE Coliseum or being able to clear content, Sora is absolutely ridiculous. So who do I think should pull? He's a straight PvE damage dealer. That's the number one thing I want you to take from this, is that he's got a bunch of high numbers. He is probably the strongest metal in the game right now when he hits that 25% critical chance. So whenever we think about finishing PvE content or something like that, you always want to check your game, because there's two ways to know if you need to pull for a new staple. The first one being you do this sort of math and you compare it to what you have currently. The second thing is that if you look at your game, the one way to really know if you need a new staple is based on this percentage right here, your progress percentage in the event. The event is all PvE stuff. You're only fighting Heartless, and after you've completed everything that you can with your current Keyblade setups, with your current Keyblade multipliers, with your current Keyblade levels, things like that, and you're still below like 80%, it's likely that you need to buy some new staples. Now, remember, again, you can always calculate the damage. It just takes a little bit longer, and it's a little bit more thinking than a lot of people would like to do, but it could pay off. Because again, you don't want to pull for a medal, have it be your new staple, but it doesn't help you pass anything. That's not good, and that's just a waste of jewels when you could have put that towards something else. So remember that you can always check that percentage completion, and then you can always just tell yourself, am I not passing content, and will having a new medal give you what you need? Remember, you can calculate the damage. If the enemy has like 500,000 bars of health, you see how much you can do with your current setup, and then you just kind of manipulate the math and be like, all right, with the new medal, I should be able to pass this mathematically. You can always do the math. So another set of people that should be pulling for this are people that want to do really, really well in PvE Coliseum. Again, I believe Sora is the strongest metal in the game with the strength stat, with the critical hit 25% chance, with the multiplier that he's got, and with the additional speed strength bonus that he gives. So he's the strongest metal in the game right now. So if you're looking to do super well in PvE, remember that to get really good at PvE, you need just one really solid damaging medal. What you should be doing at high levels of PvE Coliseum are you should have that one super strong medal in the pet slot, and the other 5 medals just support that one medal doing damage. So you stuff in things like Renova medals, you stuff in things like Terranord B, you stuff in things like copy medals, because you just want to get a lot of mileage out of that one medal. Sora can very easily be that one medal that makes the big difference between you ranking in the 2000s and then the top 500s in PvE Coliseum. So I expect a lot of whales to be pulling for Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, because again, he is mathematically the strongest metal in the game right now. Now, regardless of who needs to pull or who wants to pull, at the very end, I still recommend saving about 17,000 jewels, because that's how much it takes to get a 5-pull Mercy and then trade it perfectly. And remember that anniversary for JP is, I believe, September 9th. Something around that. It's like September 4th, September 9th, something like that. So you want to make sure you have enough jewels for the particular events that come out. Maybe there's going to be an awesome collab going on. Maybe they're going to release the Yozora medal that everyone was talking about. So at the very least, if you do plan on pulling, I do recommend that you have at least 17,000 jewels by the end of the campaign. And I also recommend, if you plan on pulling for Riku or Kairi, make sure you factor in those numbers. So if you want to pull for Riku and Sora, then you're going to need about 52,000 jewels, because you still want to have about 17,000 by the end of it. So remember, you know that Riku's coming, you know that Kairi's coming. If you plan on pulling for those medals, make sure you factor in that number when it comes to your jewels. But with that being said, that is the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer when I have the time. If you'd like to join my Discord, get some off-hours help, and kind of chat about Kingdom Hearts or other games that we're playing, definitely go ahead and join. It is right below the screen. Type it into your URL, and you are good to go. But that's all for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, until next time, take it easy.